Welcome to the April edition of the Tempo Storm Shadowverse Meta Snapshot. A new expansion is always likely to bring sweeping changes to the meta, and the Academy of Ages is no exception, especially as, very early into the expansion's release, we received a balance patch containing nerfs to a wide variety of pre-existing decks, including Discard Dragon, Last Words Shadow, Armed Dragon, Wrath Blood, and Enhance Portal. Fairy Forest, untouched by said nerfs, greatly benefited from its weakened competition and rose to become a Tier 2 deck. Discard and Wrath, despite being hit, maintain a place in the meta thanks to their powerful anti-aggro tools. Other decks from the Azvaldt era have not been so lucky, however. Most previous archetypes have ended up in the lower echelons of play or vanished completely, while the meta has shifted to an aggro-centric environment that includes newcomer decks Vengeance Blood and Mars Sword. Overall, the landscape has shifted towards something much less diverse than the last. Still, with several new archetypes present, there's a lot to discuss. Let's take a look. The classic Vengeance archetype is back, and this time it's an aggressive deck focused on overwhelming the opponent with early burn damage. The deck is split between Vengeance activators and payoffs. Once Vengeance has been activated with Waltz, Moonlight Wolfking, or Deceptive Shapeshifter, cards such as Mock Speed Marin and Golem Empress Fist can beat the opponent down. The meta is lacking in healing tools, especially now that Gilnelis has rotated out, so dealing damage over multiple turns like this is quite effective and safe, but if needed, the deck can also OTK on turn 8 with Waltz and either Full Moon Leap or Vulgus Infernal Headmistress. Speaking of a meta without Gilnelis, Discard Dragon now stands as one of the only decks that can still weather the storm of aggression in the meta without resorting to an aggro game plan itself. Despite its name, the deck at its core is a classic ramping control deck. With the addition of Waterworm's Blessing, it can ramp to powerful disrupt tools like Drazel, Ravening Enforcer, and Noir and Blanc brothers before it gets run over. Lilium the Worm Witch can be used to create bigger swing turns with Lumior, Prestigious Gold, and help to shore up the discard engine in general. Fairy Forest returns to the meta with a lot of added tools. Fauna Handler and Fairy Fun Fact provide cycle, damage, and board clear, while Castell Budding Mage doubles as both removal and a backup win condition. The deck aims to build a wide board in the early game and push as much damage as possible with Nobilis, Sable Lily Queen, and Storm followers. An aggressive archetype unharmed by the recent nerfs, the deck lacks the consistency of Vengeance and Discard, but can still hold its own against them. Yet another aggro deck, Mars Sword revolves around evolving Mars, Belligerent Flame to summon a Flame General's Regalia, then burning the opponent down with the damage from the clash effect it provides. The deck aims to curve out and have Mars ready by the first evolve turn to push clash damage, then finish with cheap Storm followers such as Amaro Spear Knight. Should the deck run out of juice, it can play Valiant Fencer on turn 7 to refill its hand and potentially end the game that turn with Heroic Followers. While it's unfavored into Vengeance Blood, its strength against discard gives it a place in tournament play. Though the deck was objectively weakened by the nerf to Scorching Grandiosity and Valnarek rotating out, a meta filled with aggro decks is one that's highly favorable for Wrath. Its ability to sustain while clearing the board, and particularly the swing turns it can create with Howling Demon, allow it to remain a very viable option. The addition of Harmonic Wolf granted the deck another cheap Wrath enabler and cantrip, while Enchanting Rhapsody creates zero-cost Devilish Divas that make for easy OTKs with Gyaradeath, Insurgent Convict. While it isn't as popular as Vengeance, Wrath can certainly still compete. The meta is very narrow, and so must our recommendations be. Any Tier 1 or Tier 2 deck is strong enough to climb with, but the gap between those and the decks in Tier 3 and below is vast, meaning Portal, Shadow, Rune, and Haven all lack any particularly good options. Decks from these classes will demand a lot more effort and time investment. Among the top dogs of Vengeance, Discard, Wrath, Fairy, and Mars, you may simply play whichever one best fits your playstyle. If results are all that matter to you, Vengeance and Discard are the most consistent options, the former if you favor an aggressive playstyle, and the latter if you prefer to play control. Academy of Ages and, importantly, the early balance patch has brought with it a meta that may not be enjoyed by many. Compared to last expansion's plethora of options, the choices available to those who want to efficiently climb the ladder or compete are very limited. Not only is the current pool of Tier 1 and 2 decks quite shallow, but nearly all of those decks are aggressive archetypes that rely on hitting their early curves and are heavily favored going first. This leaves us with a lot of variance and some highly unsatisfying mirror matchups, with many games being decided by a coin flip. The absence of so many of the previous expansion's decks is being sorely felt, and we have to wonder if the balance patch was released prematurely before any potential problems with the meta had truly become clear. Vengeance, Discard, and Wrath were certainly looking strong from the outset, but these were some of the decks least affected by the changes, and it felt odd to have archetypes such as Armed Dragon nerfed into non-existent when the expansion had barely begun. Historically, we have never seen 2 emergency balance patches one after another, so we may need to wait until the mini expansion before seeing any further adjustments. If there is in fact another patch before then, we'd expect to see it after Rage has concluded. In order for the meta to see some more diversity, we'll need either Vengeance and Discard to see nerfs, or several other archetypes to be buffed. Otherwise, the meta in the coming weeks is likely to remain much like it is now, with little development. Either way, we'll see you all in next month's edition of the Tempo Storm Shadowverse Meta Snapshot.